Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and as I said, I went to law school specifically to do First Amendment law, and free speech is a passion of mine. I think it's necessary to a thriving democracy. I think it's necessary to clear and cogent thinking. I think it's necessary to innovative thinking. And I think it's one of the great innovations that we've come up with in human history for things including peace and pluralism. It's the American Association of Colleges and Universities. They asked this incredibly soft question. Is it safe to hold unpopular positions on your campus? If you really wanted to know the answer to that, is it safe to challenge people on controversial issues? Is it safe to challenge your professors? Is it safe to engage in thought experimentation? Is it safe to engage in devil's advocacy? You know, the things that are really at the heart of meaningful, serious discussion. But instead they worded it, is it safe to merely hold unpopular positions on your campus? This is the kind of question that you would expect 100% of students to come back and say, well, sure, it's safe to hold them. And I think that's what the AACU was expecting. But they got a little bit of a surprise. First years, only 40% of first year students strongly agree with the statement that it is safe to merely hold unpopular points of view on campus. And then look what happens. Every single year they're there, it gets worse. By the time they're freshmen, by the time they're seniors, it's only 30% of students. And guess who's the most pessimistic about whether or not it's safe to hold unpopular positions on campus? Faculty. Yeah. Almost half of the worst number. Only 16.7% of faculty strongly agree with the statement that it is safe to hold unpopular points of view on campus. Something wrong is happening here. And I'm not saying this is just the result of speech codes, but I do think that they're related. And this is one of the reasons why I think you probably haven't heard that much about this problem, and why it's not viewed as much as a problem. Because as I go onto campuses, I think that the reimagining of free speech as not being something that is necessary to protect the rights of minorities, the rights of people whose voices aren't otherwise heard, which is why you need it, by the way. In a democracy, just some basic stuff that sometimes needs to be said. In a democracy, the majority voice is protected by the vote. You don't need a separate protection of freedom of speech to protect the voice of the majority. By definition, the First Amendment exists to protect the voices of minorities, the voices of the people who aren't in the majority. But somewhere in the, and there are certain philosophers that you could point to for this, but I think it was also just a trend that I could talk your ear off about, that I call sort of problems of comfort and sort of working towards the post-materialist society in the 1970s. That you end up with this sort of flipping on its head that free speech is not enough. We actually have to practice what Herbert Marcuse called repressive tolerance in order to really have this beautiful utopia that we're all hopefully heading towards. I think that's incredibly naive and wrong-headed and dangerous, but I do think it's had some success. And I think that really what universities do a lot of is they focus a lot on that one time that you dislike what someone says, and completely ignore the 10,000 times every freaking day that you actually benefit from freedom of speech, whether it's through innovations or just knowing what people actually think. But I think they've been pretty successful in this sort of discrediting of freedom of speech among the citizenry. But this is even worse than it looks. When you tease it out, it's as I said, for the entire sample size, it's 34%. But if you tease it out according to age groups, people over the age of 60, none of them think the First Amendment goes too far, practically. In the middle age groups, it gets a little bit more pessimistic as you get closer to 30. But when you get to the ages of 18 to 30, 47% of people believe that it was the worst age group of any age group. And to me, this is incredibly ironic, because 18 to 30-year-olds benefit from freedom of speech more than anybody. Oftentimes they enjoy the video games that are protected by it, they enjoy the comedians that are protected by it, they enjoy the music that's protected by it. And to actually have pulled this one over on students that actually free speech they're not that interested on, I think is a great generational bamboozlement. There's a wonderful book called The Big Sort that talks about how increasingly, not only do we listen to Fox News or MSNBC or only NPR or go to the websites that reflect what we already believe, we increasingly live in neighborhoods that look exactly like us in terms of ideology. And it's getting worse. It's getting more dramatic right down to the actual county and neighborhood and block of your street that we're increasingly glomming together in like-minded cliques. So this echo chamber effect is poisonous, and it's one of these things in the social science, as far as things that experiment after experiment they do, is that when you get like-minded people together and have them only talk to other like-minded people, they tend to become a lot more radical in what they believe, and they start adopting really bizarre, and in some cases hateful opinions of the people who disagree with them. And universities should not be contributing to this negative intellectual cycle. I'm probably one of the only First Amendment people who mentions any amount of Buddhism in his speeches, but I do think it's crucial, because one of the noble truths of Buddhism is that life is pain. And one of the great secrets of the noble truth that life is pain is that as soon as you actually recognize that life is pain, life becomes a lot less painful. And that's something that's, I'm an atheist, I make no bones about that either, but I do study Buddhism, and as far as actually useful knowledge that I've learned in my life, that has helped me tremendously. I think it's psychologically healthy to understand that. I think that it's helped a lot of people throughout their lives to understand, wait a second, this pain that I'm experiencing, it's a common part of the human experience, and it's normal, and this is what we deal with every day, so much so that there's a philosophy where the first truth is that life is pain. If you create the expectation that life is not pain, and that every time something painful happens to you, it's got to be someone else's fault or something wrong and terrible has happened, you are dooming that person to, in my opinion, ultimately what is a psychologically unhealthy state. And if that's actually the way you're teaching students to engage with the world, there is no cave in which they can hide to get away from pain. And that's one of the reasons why I think you end up having this, the offensiveness bar gets lower and lower and lower. Because when you make the bar for what can be stopped because it's offensive be the key, then people start realizing, but that kind of hurts too, and that kind of hurts too. What you need people to be able to say is that this is what freedom of speech is what we did, was an innovation that helped us replace actual violence and combat. It's gonna hurt sometimes, and actually sometimes that pain is actually fairly good for you. But if you create the expectation that you can escape from this world without the daily abrasions of everyday life and without hurt feelings, you're saying that either you're telling someone that they should choose not to live. So I do think that there's something deeply psychologically unhealthy about it.